in a lot of the critical things that we have involved, that we're dealing with in our state, like rural health care, but also continue to work with them on the great things that they've done and building off of that work, like fully funding public education, making sure that we have an educated workforce so that Georgia remains #1 in the country for business. I mean, we've done some amazing things in our state, and I'm certainly proud of my record serving in the legislature and Secretary of State, and I want to make Georgians proud of me as their governor, and that's what I'm going to be focused on every day.
Brian, Governor Elect, do you believe there were issues in the election, and do you believe there are ways to address those issues during the General Assembly, either through the budget or through legislation, whether it's replacing equipment or anything, legally wise?
Well, let me just say this, because I think Georgians out there need to know how much I appreciate the people that work in elections. Those county elections officials, the registrars, they have done an amazing job. We had record turnout in this election. That is something to be proud of in a mid-year election. They are the ones that are on the front lines every day, taking, quite honestly, a lot of criticism that's unnecessary, quite honestly. If there's things that need to be fixed, there's a place to do that. It's right upstairs during the legislative process. No one has worked harder to do that than myself, having bipartisan commissions in the past and one that I created that's still going on now to deal with all things elections, having public meetings, hearing from the public. Those people and the folks in the Secretary of State's office, I appreciate them as well. They are following the law. If people don't like the law, then we need to work as a legislative body and an executive branch as governor to change those. And that's part of what will be the process moving forward, as it has been in the past.
With the hard fight that you fought in the primary and then in the actual election, do you think there needs to be election reform?
Well, look, we've reformed elections already. I mean, we did that when I first got in office. We're working on doing that again with the SAFE Commission that I helped create to move to a new voting system. I stand ready to work with anybody that wants to change election law. But in Georgia, we have those laws in place for a reason, to make sure that we have secure, accessible, fair elections in our state. And we have done that. We've had some of the smoothest statewide elections that we've ever had over the last 8.5 years. And we have processes to make sure that only eligible people are casting their ballot, and that our elections are not only secure, but they're accessible. And we've talked about this many times. I helped create online voter registration, working to get it passed in the legislature. We have 1 million more people on the rolls now. Those are things that we can be proud of, and we'll continue to build off of as governor.
What's your message to citizens who were Abrams supporters who may feel a little like this election was stolen from them?
Like what?
Who may feel like this election was stolen from them, to the citizens?
Well, look, we have laws on the books that prevent elections from being stolen from anyone. This election we had record turnout again. Very proud of that. I received the most votes of anybody that's ever run for governor in the state of Georgia, and I'm proud of that. And I said earlier, Stacey Abrams ran one heck of a campaign, and I know she could be proud of that effort as well. Look, it's a tough business, politics, but the fact of the matter is the election is now over. And I've got to focus on governing this state, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Couple more.
Do you plan to propose funding for the election next year?
Well, that's a very good question, and I have been working in the past with the governor's office, the Office of Planning and Budget, to deal with the new voting system in preparation that we could have that in place by 2020. I know that they have been working on that, and I stand ready to do the same as governor.
Republicans got clobbered in the metro area suburbs. What is the message you hope to help shore up the suburbs, let's say?
Well, look, this was a tough election. I'm proud to have won. I'm proud to have gotten the most votes ever from someone that ran for governor in our state. I've dealt with the same type situation when I first ran for the legislature, won a very, very close race. And I'm going to do exactly what I did then. I'm going to get in office, and I'm going to do what I told people I would do. and give them a good reason to vote for me in 2022.
Two more. Anybody else?
Have you spoken with Governor Deal? Has he given you any advice moving forward?
I have spoken with Governor Deal, not in the last 24 hours, but Governor Deal's given me a lot of advice over the years, as has former Governor Sonny Perdue. I think everyone knows how highly I think of those two gentlemen, and quite honestly, a lot of other governors that have served this state. And I'll certainly look forward to working with all of them and taking advice from them so I can continue in their footsteps of moving our state in the right direction. And I'll be seeing Governor Deal tomorrow. I have not.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. That is Georgia's official governor-elect, Brian Kemp, reminding folks it is done, it is over. He has a state to lead and very little time to get everything in order to do that before his inauguration. This now 11 days after the election that was considered very, very close, closer than many thought. It had a lot of legal battles back and forth. But in the end, very complimentary of his challenger, Stacey Abrams, even though last night she was stressing in conceding the race that this wasn't a concession speech. Listen from last night.
To watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession.
All right, so the legal challenges continue. We should stress that Ms. Abrams is really focusing on what she had been calling voter disenfranchisement in large urban African-American areas that might have prevented 50,000 or so, largely African-Americans, from getting a chance to vote at all. Even if you assume that were the case, though, and all of those votes would have gone to her, it still would not have made up the gap that was about 55,000 when all was said and done in the electoral counts that we did have out of Georgia. The president, though, was quite complimentary of Ms. Abrams himself, saying in a tweet, congratulations to Brian Kemp on becoming the new governor of Georgia. Stacey Abrams fought brilliantly and hard. She will have a terrific political future. Brian was unrelenting and will become a great governor for the truly wonderful people of Georgia. So the issue there in the Peach State is resolved and done, and they move on, but not so the sore feelings and the legal battles that I guess now are going to continue. To another state, the Sunshine State, and the battle that will not end at all. We're going to go to Griff Jenkins live with us in Broward County, Florida, with the very latest on a handheld recount that could linger for a few days. Griff.
Hey, Neil, the manual recount in the Senate race has ended, and so too have Senator Bill Nelson's chances of a political comeback. Let me take you inside the Broward Elections Office. You see here they're counting and tabulating some other races, the Agriculture Secretary. But here's the story. Broward was Nelson's best chance of flipping this race. We were told in the beginning by Nelson attorneys that there were 25,000 votes here that had not been counted. That was not the case. Yesterday, they counted 31,000 over and under votes, of which only 447 were over votes. Those could have gone Nelson's way. We'll find out the total tally. But at the end of the day, the math just isn't here for Nelson. The really only question that remains is whether or not the supervisor of elections here, Dr. Brenda Snipes, will continue to keep her job. A lot of scrutiny on her and the way she's handled this race and some in the past. I caught up with her yesterday. Here's what she had to say.
Things are going as we planned it. We have all these people here, and they are willing to stay until we get it all done.
Are you pleased that you got the hand count at least sorted early?
Sure. Yeah, same setup. Absolutely.
So again, Senator Nelson started his career in 1972, about 2 hours north of here, Neil, in Brevard County. But it looks, by all accounts, that it's going to end here in Broward, the best shot for blue votes that just don't exist here. He's going to get less than 500 of a net gain here, perhaps later today when we get the results. Certainly by tomorrow's 12 noon deadline for official results to be reported to Tallahassee. Neil?
All right, Griff, thank you very much, Griff Jenkins. There have been reports circulating as well in a number of papers that the senator was going to be conceding sometime this weekend. There's no way to verify that, ascertain that to Griff's point until we have those official tabulations. And they could come this weekend. They're moving rapidly on this. But the state certifies all of the state elections on November 20th. All right, let's get the read from attorney Brian Rotella, not affiliated with the Florida candidates. He did advise the Trump campaign on some health care issues back in 2016. Brian, good to have you. What do they look for in the hand recount, the undervote versus the overvote? What are they going through here?
Good morning, Neil. Hey, look, we're in Florida, and what they're looking for in overvotes and undervotes. Overvotes, they're looking for situations where somebody wrote in Bill Nelson for senator and they checked on the box or circled in their box Bill Nelson for senator. Undervotes, they're looking where, well, okay, they voted for Andrew Gillum for governor, voted everywhere else, but they left the senator out. So those are the two major tranches that you're looking at. But let me tell you something, Neil. It's a football Saturday, right? Florida screwed all this up, for my legal opinion, and I know there's so many lawyers down here, it's like a Game of Thrones of White Walker lawyers in Florida. But let me tell you, on a football Saturday, what do we not do when we're looking for first downs? We don't bring the chains out when you're 2.5, 3 yards away, right? It's got to be within like 6 inches. That's what Florida's doing because of what we screwed up all the way back in 2000. Our Florida Election Reform Act of 2001 set this manual recount at 0.5%. No problem there. We saw the manuals go a couple days ago. They actually worked well, looked pretty accurate. The hand recount is at 0.25%. Well, 0.25% is like 12,000 votes. In the history of the United States, how many elections have been overturned when they went back to count votes when you're looking at that margin? And let's remember, in 2000, it was a 537 vote difference here in Florida between future President George W. Bush and former Vice President Al Gore. We got to change our law, number one, and take this hand count threshold down. Otherwise, I hate to say this to the rest of the country, we're going to be front and center in 2020, 2022, and 2024 probably again.
Well, that's probably why the judge, who was arguing all these various legal challenges on both sides, has said that, Florida's looking like a laughingstock to the world. Having said that, Brian, I mean, I was curious as well about the so-called absentee and other ballots where there were signature issues and they have to verify the signatures. But even allowing for the back and forth on that, if Senator Nelson were to get all of those 4,000 plus votes, it wouldn't close the gap. So is it your legal sense that the votes just are not there for him?
Game's over. Senator Nelson we need to have a reality show or an intervention. You know that show, Intervention? Senator Nelson needs an intervention. He's done. And in living here in Florida, I've heard some guests on other Fox programs, and of course yours, Neil, talking about Senator Nelson here in Florida. Obviously, I'm a conservative. I'm going to tell you something. There's not a lot of accomplishments with Senator Nelson, just not a lot to talk about. Now, he's had a long career here. I think he should look into something. I mean, my goodness, the Hall of Presidents we have, he's kind of robotic. He could be the front guest show host for that.
Well, let's not be flippant about it. I'm interested in your views of what's going on at the polls and the legality of them, not your personal political opinions. But thank you very much for stopping by, Brian Rotella. All right, let's get a sense of this here. All again is it's a legal back and forth on this. And the bottom line here, there is a procedure to go through, and the balance back and forth on this really depends on what ballots appear to be screwed up and what ballots appear to be legit, what ballots recognize intent. And there is this battle back and forth as to what to glean from what a voter might have left out if he or she left a particular position open. You've heard a great deal, particularly in Broward County, where the Senate contest or the Senate candidates were not delineated, were not voted on, but the gubernatorial candidates, the Agricultural Commission candidates, they were. So they're trying to sort that out. Again, a long way from being resolved, but they're going through this, at least by Florida terms, rapidly. Let's get the read from Florida, New York Congresswoman Nan Hayworth, Democratic strategist Rochelle Ritchie, Fox News contributor Kat Tim. Nan, looking at all of this, I mean, we can go back and forth about who screwed up what, and it goes back to 2000. I just wonder how Florida found itself in this. I mean, again, the same issues, again.
You know, Neil, it's like a really bad version of Groundhog Day. Apparently, after each botched election, and Brenda Snipes has a long history, destroying ballots, of mishandling, chain of custody issues, all kinds of things.
We should stress it's not that she's personally destroying ballots, but missing ballots on the list.
There were ballots,
and others have looked at whether they have to deal with a new way.
Exactly.
It didn't seem, though, from what I could see, Rochelle, to be a way for the state as a whole to deal with these issues, because each county had issues that it shouldn't have had, because that was a big criticism of 2000. Everyone's going to be on the same page. Now, you can't use the exact same ballot for local races and local towns. I understand that. But when it came to some of the bigger issues like the Senate race, the gubernatorial race, the agricultural commissioner race, they should have been on the same page, and they weren't.
Yeah, I find it amazing that it's been 18 years and Florida still has found a way to be the biggest screw-up when it comes to our elections. I mean, the fact that you had, I believe that the senatorial race was at the bottom left corner of the ballot. This is one of the most important races, so I'm wondering what genius designed this ballot.
But both parties approved those ballots.
I know, and that's important. Yeah. Exactly. So, again, what genius looked at this and said this is okay? I would have looked at this had I worked, for the senator and said, oh, no, you've got to move him up. That is not going to work. People, there's so much information on these ballots. Even when I voted here in New York, there's so much information on these ballots in two sides, and it unfolds, and it's like a pamphlet that you feel like you have to read. And I think that if we have these very important races, if we want to ensure that our electoral process works, we have to make sure that that the eye is attracted to what we really need them to focus on. And that's not to minimize the importance of the other races, but this was huge, and this was a huge loss for the voters in Florida.
Bottom line, the voters in Florida, unless something changes, Kat, have elected Ron DeSantis their governor, albeit by a close margin over Andrew Gillum. And it looks that Rick Scott will be going to Washington to replace Senator Nelson. And I'm wondering if, because of the closeness of both races, there's a poll on this, and there's an asterisk on this, and is that right or fair?
Is what right or fair? That there's
just that we're always going to question the winner.
Yeah, I think so. And in Florida, it's been close all the time. That's what happens. It's a swing state, which is why Florida should be prepared that maybe it's going to be kind of close, and maybe there might have to be a recount.
Maybe there'll be lots of ballots.
They have a bunch of overheated, old voting machines that can't handle these recounts. You need to be prepared for a situation like this. If there's problems in another state, it's not that big of a deal, But Florida's a state where we're always looking, what's going to happen in Florida? This is a swing state. Anything could happen. It's going to be close. This isn't like this came out of nowhere and they couldn't have anticipated it. It's happened before. So, and you know what? I also think it's going to happen again in 2020.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to solve these problems. I think we're going to deal with this again in 2020.
I mean, think of just the cost to taxpayers.
Yes.
I mean, it is a dreadful disservice, and apparently the governor has the power to remove the supervisor of elections. We know that Governor Bush replaced Brenda Snipes' predecessor with her, but not the power to appoint someone or to keep that person, I guess from performing badly, because the voters of Broward County get to elect their supervisor, and they've elected Brenda Snipes over and over again.
Michelle?
I just think Florida has to get it together. I mean, I'm tired of it. And I was a reporter in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I remember being down there during one of the elections. And, you wonder, like, am I going to be at work for 20 hours as they do another recount? I think
they're magnified in close elections, right?
It is. And I just think that at some point, like I said, it's been 18 years. Soon it'll be 20 years. And if we have this problem in 2020, then it needs to be a federal investigation.
Close elections. All right, we're going to show you what's going on right now in Florida, in Broward and Palm Beach, where it's looking at the ballots by hand, one at a time. This hand recount necessitated when it gets within 0.25% of the vote, which is in the Senate battles, why it remains a battle. We'll have more after this. In town when it comes to Washington, when it comes to the House of Representatives, and if you think of Maxine Waters, who is going after a lot of banks who she fears that begun to think that they're going to ease up on regulations. She says it's not going to happen under her watch. She takes over House Financial Services. Then there's Bill Pascrell, the Democrat in New Jersey, who will have a key post with a subcommittee that looks at trade under House Ways and Means, who said that the president's deals he got on trade with the likes of Canada and Mexico, he has a lot of problems with them. Then you got Bernie Sanders, who's leading the Stop Walmart Act movement and wants to say that they can't buy back stock unless they pay all their workers at least $15 an hour. You got an idea here. There's a trend to this, and it's going to pick up steam. Fox News contributor Jonas Max Ferris, S&P Global Portfolio Manager Aaron Gibbs, and the Wall Street Journal's John Bussey. Aaron, do you on this sort of domino sort of railing after a lot of key financial interest and the boomerang effect? What do you think?
You know, I'm not too worried about Waters when her biggest threat is I'm just going to be able to slow down things. She can't actually pass laws, so certainly having to brought in front of the committee, and that is certainly a cost. But I don't see a huge amount of power. She can, you know, we can see the financials hit for a day or two, but they tend to bounce back very quickly. And we don't see any big changes to the bottom line. So when looking at the financial sectors,
on the big bank, or even the community bank, because she was very concerned about easing up on regulations here.
Yep.
I shouldn't worry, or I should a little bit?
Well, your lawyers should worry.
Okay.
They're going to make a ton of money. And so you'd be paying a lot more to your counsel. But in general, your bottom line, we don't see any big impact because we had never brought in the deregulation into expected earnings changes so far yet. We're still expecting them to make, you know, a little below the broader market. So, yeah, it may take a little longer, but we're not expecting meaningful impact.
What do you think, John?
So I kind of buy this as well, because the rulemaking authority has already been passed down to the agencies, right? The SEC is kind of in the process of making rules on Dodd-Frank. She can't really roll that back. But there's a lot that she can do, and a lot of it is signaling forward, right? So maybe now in the next year or so, it's going to be, you know, pretty much the process that we're seeing unfold. But if she's signaling that she wants to roll back regulation over the long term, when Democrats perhaps get the presidency in 2020 or the Senate, if she's signaling to the market that that's in the offing, then you might begin to see other behavior in the stock market. But in the short term, this is pretty much status quo is kind of where it is. She can create a lot of sort of noise in the Congress by holding hearings and questioning, is the Consumer Protection Agency really protecting consumers? But there's not a lot she can do with the made law right now.
You know, I thought the sleeper sort of movement of the week was Bill Pascrell in New Jersey saying, you know, before we go on to China and whether you got to deal with them, let's look at this Canadian pact, Jonas, and what we have with the Mexicans. And I don't like it. And I have serious problems with it. I agree to both of these fine guests' point about there's very little, you know, a Democratic House is going to be able to do. But since a lot of deals pass through there, particularly these, there they can do some damage or delay, or both.
Yeah, I would disagree a little with the panelists. First of all, a lot of the plans Trump had are going to be slowed, if not stopped. So that's not necessarily a positive. As far as business as usual, I think you said, like, Maxine Waters says she's going to go after Deutsche Bank to see what deals they've done with Trump and the Russians. That doesn't seem like business as usual. If I was a shareholder in Deutsche Bank, I'd be a little concerned about that. Specifically, Neil, this goes back to...
Isn't that Donald Trump's bank as well?
He's the last... 20 years ago, when we did the Bush-Gore election, Neil, it was my first time I was on with you. We talked about the stocks, how they moved before the election, if you recall. I don't know if you recall. I still do. I'm very young. Before this election...
That was the first time we had you, and you were 12, I believe.
I believe. Yeah. And the stocks that were backing Bush were doing better before the election, and Bush won. Well, the bank stocks before this election have not been doing well compared to the S&P 500. So somebody who bets a lot of money, investors, and we're thinking this is not going to be good for banks, what's happening to this change, and the stocks are going to...
They could have been reading rates.
Now,
right?
there's plenty of other stuff that goes on. Interest rates flat, the yield curve flattened out. In fact, you could make the same case that natural resource stocks have not gone up since Trump, and all Trump's done is taken away all the regulations that Obama put in on natural resources. But I still think it's a bad environment for banks.
Yeah, I would just say from an investor perspective, there's a lot more to what bank stocks do than just regulation. And regulation is something that really only affects once it's taken effect. Wall Street doesn't put a lot of value onto or changing the valuation of the stock until it's actually in effect. So the flattening yield curve is what's been holding down financial
we
stocks.
should explain that as the gap between short or long-term rates, and when it gets to be darn near even, I mean, then they worry
it's like,
about
well, why
a
do I lend money for a long time when I'm not going to
it's not as if the House can't do some changes of its own with the Democratic majority. There is talk where the Democrats want to have just a simple majority to push a tax increase on the wealthy, for example. Now, that wouldn't go much further than, for example, in the Senate, or it would certainly get the blessings of the president. But it could change the way the House moves.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
So Jonas is right. I mean, it's not going to be business as usual.
Here he said such nasty things.
It's not going to be business as usual because what are going to be the unknown consequences of actions by the House? Investigating Deutsche Bank, for example, or any number of things, including on something like trade. Yes, there's fast track is kind of limits the power right now of the Congress to affect the trade deals that the president is pushing, but they can always pull back from that and say, hey, you didn't consult us enough, and that's required by,
and they have to
fast
write
track.
Off on it, right?
And they have to write off on it. So you didn't consult us enough. We're going to reopen this. On the other hand, are they going to want to give the president some on trade? Because, frankly, the Democrats and the president on trade are in many areas aligned.
More aligned than the president Republicans.
Than the previous Republicans, right?
All right. See you very soon, guys. In the meantime... Well, migrants are facing a backlash they didn't anticipate in Tijuana as that caravan reaches the border from Mexicans. William Lajeunesse is in Tijuana, Mexico. William.
Well, Neil, this is the main migrant shelter. It's closed right now to the media, but I'm going to give you a look inside as we move over here. You mentioned in the intro there were some incidents last night, 2 rock-throwing incidents, one here at the shelter, another at the beach, where the Mexicans and the migrants Police made 7 arrests, 2 for fighting, 3 for pot, 2 for drugs. The CBP commissioner was nearly hit by a rock out by the beach. There are now 2,600 caravan migrants here. They're expecting another 3,800. They could be here from 6 months to 18 months, according to state officials. The mayor says it's a human tsunami. He wants them to leave. As for the migrants, reality is setting in. They got here on blind faith and the belief that if they claimed asylum, they would get into the U.S. and get released. Now they're learning that's no longer the case.
He says that he doesn't believe any longer about the political asylum. They were lied when they came down here. Now they happen to realize that the people who already applied, they're getting returned back to their countries.
Now, for President Trump, this is a line in the sand. Tijuana is a test of his policy, the ability to deter future Central American migrants. That began with the surge in 2014.
If they have such fear and such problems and they hate their country, why do we see all the flags being waved? For Guatemala, for Honduras, for El Salvador. This has nothing to do with asylum. This has to do with getting into our country illegally.
So if a person arrived here and claimed asylum today, Neil, it would be at least a 5-week wait. So people are settling in for the long term. The state of Baja has asked for $4 million from the federal government to try to care for these people, give them shelter. But there is tension, definitely, between the locals and the migrants. And the locals, of course, don't want them to stay here. Back to you.
William, thank you very, very much. We've got U.S. Customs and Border Protection Director of Field Operations, Pete Flores, back with us. Pete, thank you for taking the time.
Yes, good to be here. Good morning.
Well, it's interesting that the altercations are involving those migrants with Mexican authorities, particularly Tijuana residents who are saying they're overwhelmed by this army, and it's not even the army that could be into the thousands within the next few weeks and months. Hard to say, but obviously they want to get more help. The Tijuana mayor talking about $4 million in extra aid to help them deal with this. What do you think's going on?
So I think from the very beginning, we've noticed this caravan to be different than other caravans, and we can see that through their actions and the tactics, the violence and force that being used, the disruption of what's going on down there. We have 3,000 sitting in Tijuana right now. We have another 1,000 plus sitting in Mexicali. And I think the community in Mexico, in particular Tijuana, is worried about the actions being taken by the caravan members. And then what that action then translates to in regards to what we're prepared to do on our borders, in between the ports and at the ports, to ensure that the safety of our border and not be overrun by any masses coming at us.
You know, much has been said, maybe help me with this, about what constitutes getting asylum status. If you're Life is threatened, it's one thing, but if you are escaping poverty, sadly, that's another matter and is not, the definition of seeking asylum status. Now, for many of the Honduran refugees coming in, they're trying to say we're leaving gang violence that is tearing our country apart and threatening our lives. Does that constitute getting asylum status?
It does not. So what we're seeing here is mostly migrants that are coming as economic migrants coming through here. And what's interesting about this group, even though we have migrants arriving in the Mexicali and the Tijuana areas, none of them have applied for asylum on arrival here. So they're here in these shelters. Some of them don't want to go to these shelters, and Mexican authorities are having a difficult time controlling and getting the individuals into shelters in order for them to apply for asylum, but they're refusing to do so.
So what do we do? In that event, as more and more come in, I know the Mexicans have offered, and I get numbers all over the map, you might know these better than I do, Pete, that up to 2,000 of the migrants citizenship in Mexico, and many have bypassed that, seeking instead citizenship in the United States or asylum status in the United States. How do we respond to that if we know, well, Mexico just offered you citizenship, you've declined, what's our response?
So, Mexico offered refugee status, asylum status. They've offered them employment. They continue to offer them even as they sit in Tijuana. Many of them not taking them up on that offer. As we know from previous experience, migrants that come through the Northern Triangle to Central America, and very few of them will be accepted for the asylum status, so very few of them will get that status.
Pete Flores, thank you very, very much. I always appreciate the clarifications.
Thank you.
All right, have a good weekend. All right, in the meantime, Republican Senator Joni Ernst has some thoughts on what's going on in Florida. And obviously, Republicans are looking for... All right, the counting goes on in Broward County. And by the way, Broward County Election Supervisor Brenda Snipes under fire yet again as we await the results of that hand recount. Joni Ernst, the new vice chair of the Senate Republican Conference, has a strong message for that embattled official.
You need to have people of integrity that are running elections. And so if problems haven't been corrected, that responsibility falls directly on that commissioner of elections. And certainly if we see that there are problems, then either the problems need to be corrected or the person in charge of those elections needs to go.
Any advice for Senator Nelson?
I would say, Senator Nelson, leave a great legacy and leave a positive reflection of your time in the United States Senate. It's time to say goodbye and thank you to the great folks of Florida.
Well, Senator, it's interesting how the midterms are sort of being recalibrated and rethought of more than a week after the fact. It is possible, when all is said and done, Democrats could pick up about 36, maybe as many as 38 seats. Does that constitute a blue wave to you?
That is not a blue wave. That is a blue trickle at most. And if you look back at Presidents Clinton and Obama during their midterm elections, they lost far more seats than President Trump has. He is much closer to President Reagan in seats that were lost in the House. So, no, it is not a blue wave. And the fact that we are picking up seats in the United States Senate speaks very highly not only of our Senate members and the quality candidates that we put forward, but also of the Trump administration and understanding that the policies we have in place are working for the American people.
You know what's so weird? I know you use the Reagan analogy, and you're right. Ronald Reagan lost more seats. Of course, we were in the depths of a recession that was looking intractable. I think people on the left and right would readily agree the economy is substantially better now, one of the more dramatic recoveries we've seen in history, and yet not a tangible benefit in the House to the degree you would think. What do you think limited Republican gains?
Well, I do think that our messaging is very important, and we shouldn't just talk at the voters. We shouldn't just talk at our constituents. We need to connect with them, and we need to understand what their concerns and their issues are. And then how do we reflect our public policy based on their concerns and do it in a conservative manner? We need to message that, and we need to make sure that that connection exists. That's why it's going to be really important to message our priorities coming up for 2020.
You know, the rap against your party, Senator, fairly or not, and maybe just your leadership position will change the approach. But that suburban women are a problem for Republicans, and that it was a problem again in the midterms, especially in a lot of the key states where seats on the House side flip. Does it concern you?
Well, it does concern me, but again, the policies that we are putting in place that will help suburban women, we need to make sure that we are communicating those clearly, and I don't feel that we did that adequately in this last election cycle. My home state of Iowa, for example, we did lose 2 of our Republican congressional seats. We saw those flip, and we attribute that considerably to those suburban women. So when it comes to health care and the actual advances that we've made, whether it is working on pharmaceutical costs, whether it is doubling the child tax credit, whatever that might be, we need to make sure that women know about those initiatives, know that we are working for them, and really making sure that we are hearing what their concerns are. They want to know that they have been heard, and I feel if they have been heard and we're acting on that, then we will do very well in 2020.
Senator, your state no stranger to you know, the pressure that's building on the trade front and the freeze that exists between ourselves and the Chinese. There was talk today that the president is ready to at least put in motion something that will indicate more constructive talks when he meets with Chinese leader Xi Jinping next week. If there is no formal construct of a deal, it doesn't have to be a deal. I had one Wall Street pro tell me all bets are off for the markets and our economy, and this thing could drag on a year or more. What do you think?
Well, I think we do need to have a very, very carefully constructed outline of what we would like to see and accomplish moving forward with the Chinese. And I am very glad that the president will be meeting with President Xi Jinping and moving forward. We need them to move forward. Now, my folks back home, my farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, they all understand why the president is doing what he's doing. But of course, I had one farmer, he eloquently stated it. I understand why the president is doing it. I just don't understand why previous presidents didn't do it sooner.
All right, that was Joni Ernst. And now in the leadership of the Republican Senate, the senator from Iowa. Meantime, she was mentioning President Trump. He is on his way to fire-ravaged California. 74 known dead right now, 100 still missing. We'll have more to this. Meet with those fighting the deadly fires, the wildfires, and the victims of those fires, family and related. Jonathan Hunt has the latest. Jonathan.
Neil, good morning to you. The president is due to land in Northern California about 2 hours from now. His first stop will obviously be the deadly Camp Fire, the worst of the fires that we have seen ravage so much of California recently. There he will, if history is our guide, take an aerial tour to assess the damage and then meet with and thank first responders, meet with also some of the families who have lost everything and who are now just living in makeshift camps up there, just trying to get by. It is a desperate situation up north, and the president is expected to spend a few hours up there. Then we're told, although not confirmed yet, that he's likely to head here, Neil, to Southern California, where the Woolsey fire has done so much damage. We don't know his exact movements down here, but he will presumably take a look at damage like this. This is in the Malibu, the city of Malibu, where hundreds of homes were lost, Neil, and so many families are going to come back when they are eventually let back in here to find that there is pretty much nothing left of their lives. So it is going to be a big day for the president. It's an emotional day when you see this kind of destruction up close, and he is here, obviously, to try to offer help and support to so many people who have lost so much, Neil.
Just incredible. Jonathan, thank you very much. This fellow knows it firsthand. Mayor of Chico, California, Sean Morgan. Mayor, very good to have you back. How are things looking there?
Good morning, Neil. Well, it's a desperate situation. It's catastrophic. The air is full of smoke. We're happy to be on your show to bring more recognition of what's going on here, but it's very, very bad.
Do you know, I mean, the number of missing in the area and how they arrived at, these are ever-changing numbers, Mayor, and I'm just wondering what are some of the latest figures you have?
You know, it's a great question, Neil. You know, it started at like 150, and then it was 630 2 days ago, and it's up to 1,000 today. A retirement community, people are only starting to realize they miss people, so they start making those inquiries. Oh, I haven't heard from so-and-so in so long, so that number keeps going up.
What do you tell people there? Many of them want to go back to their homes, assess the damage, get a sense of what they do now. What do you tell them?
That's the hardest part, because we don't have a date when they can go back. We don't even have a date, when you can't go back, because they're looking for bodies. There's a lot of toxic material. You just give them a hug and a prayer and try and console them, because at the moment there aren't any good answers. The federal and state governments, they're coming in full support, doing everything they can, but we don't want to give people bad information, and that is a problem and a challenge right now, Neil.
How are you holding up, Mayor?
I'm doing fine. I'm getting lots of support from people like yourself and others. We're just trying to give Paradise everything it needs as we absorb their community into ours. The most important thing is to get those people back on their feet and start the rebuild.
You got your priorities in order. Mayor, thank you for taking the time. Sean Morgan, the mayor of Chico, California, the president en route to the region to get a first look at one of the biggest fire catastrophes this nation has ever seen. A little more after this.